الحمد لله رب العالمين، نحمده ونشكره على ما هدانا، ونصلي ونسلم على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب قلوبنا وطبيب نفوسنا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد
اللهم صل وسلم على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل وسلم على محمد وآل محمد
وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين وصحبه المنتجبين. اللهم لعن أول ظالم ظلم حق محمد وآل محمد وآخر تابع له على ذلك. اللهم لعن العصابة التي جاهدت الحسين وشايعت وبايعت وتابعت على قتله، اللهم لعنهم جميعا. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله، وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك. عليك منا سلام الله أبدا ما بقينا وبقي الليل والنهار، ولا جعله الله آخر العهد مني لزيارتكم. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. عليكم السلام. قال الله العظيم في محكم كتابه: أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم، بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. كنتم خير أمة أخرجت للناس تأمرون بالمعروف وتنهون عن المنكر. Indeed, although the term or the structure is in the past, but those who understand Arabic grammar, they say the verse is talking about the future, something that ultimately is going to happen, in which the Muslim Ummah becomes the exemplary Ummah. Kuntum khayru ummatin, the exemplary Ummah. Ukhrijat linnas, the role model for humanity. That you have these two conditions: تأمرون بالمعروف وتنهون عن المنكر. And there are a few others. The sisters cannot hear in the back. It's not connected to the back.
They don't hear anything, right?
The mic.
It's not. Maybe the mic itself is not connected.
That is much better than this one. This one is connected. That one, I think we can put it in the front. This one, let me connect. Hello.
ممكن تخليه بهذه. المشكلة لما نفتر على جهة ثانية راح ابتعد عن الميكروفون. شكرا. كنتم خير أمة أخرجت للناس تأمرون بالمعروف وتنهون عن المنكر. Ultimately, the day will come when the Muslim Ummah becomes the exemplary Ummah, because of certain characteristics. We mentioned two here, and that is the Amr bil Ma'ruf, which is encouraging the good deed, and Nahy anil Munkar, discouraging bad deeds. Last night, I presented a number of issues, but the main focus was in the light of the unique occasion that we have with the commemoration or the commiseration of Ashura. Alaykum as-salam. What is the best form of organizing this model that not only addresses the emotional aspect that inherent within the story of Karbala? And I said last night that there is no one that has read the story, familiar with it, that can say that this story or this history does not have emotional component to it. It's full, particularly after the landing on the plain of Karbala until the last minute, or even moving out and coming back to Medina, even going to Kufa, Sham, and ultimately to Medina. Every stage, every station is full of what an individual could be emotionally charged when we look at the narratives and the story that have been narrated. So we cannot deny or strip our commiseration or commemoration from that fact. But there is a fundamental problem if we give too much emphasis to the emotional aspect. Because if you read the statements, the slogans, narratives, the speeches, and the ahadith that Imam gives right from the moment that comes out of Medina until the last moment of his life, in addition to what it contextualizes the story, which is time, his own time and space, that reflects on his own story the way it is happening, there are what we call macro statements that talks and leaves the incident in Karbala as an historic event that deals with the conflict between right and falsehood, haqq and batil. And I also stated last night that from the moment of the creation of Adam until the last breath of human being on earth, you are going to have the conflict, the perpetual conflict between falsehood and justice going on, truth all the time. The emotional aspect I indicated last night links us to the person, to Imam Hussein salawatullah salam alayhi directly, where we absorb and take in, imagine what would have happened to our family if we were part of the characters that played a role in that time. No father can imagine that you hold your 6-month-old child after 3 days of thirst, and you say, you even plead to basic human nature. You have something to grind against me. What is the fault of this child? And hears or reads the response that he receives without becoming emotional. It's natural. How do we then create the balance between those macro statements, particularly when we accept كل أرض كربلاء وكل يوم عاشوراء as a metaphor? Not specifically that, yes, the story of Karbala happened, say, the year 61 after Hijrah. But the concrete statement, the concrete challenges that it presented to us is something which is going to happen again and again and again and again. Every era, every historical phase will have its own Yazid and its own Hussein. And the Yazid, alaykum assalam, the Yazid of the time will have his or her own camp, and the Hussein of the time will have their camp. Where we locate ourselves depends on where we station, what do we do in our lives. The question, as far as individual, just two examples that I gave was clear to outline the shortcoming that we really, if we want to use the life of Imam as a framework, as a modality for making judgment, immediately it becomes clear that there is something fundamentally wrong. We fall behind. On a personal level, I talked about it. And particularly when we hear Imam says, وَإِنَّمَا خَرَجْتُ لِطَلَبِ الْإِصْلَاحِ فِي أُمَّةِ جَدِّي رَسُولِ اللَّهِ. Reform. What kind of a society Islam considers the desired society? That's where the verse that I started with. Kuntum khayra ummatin, the desired, the role model society for everybody else. What are the characteristics of such a society? To understand, I answered one of the questions last night that particularly with regard to the ownership and possession, I said you have to contextualize it in what we call the Islamic ontology or worldview, how Islam looks at the world. When it comes to insan, or the son of Adam, or human being, Islam considers this creature that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created to be a mixture of two different things. There are a number of verses that talks about, what, to borrow a phrase from Christian narrative, the Genesis, the creation of human being in Islam. That God takes a piece of clay and blows in it, and forms and gives light or life to something that today we call it human being. Naturally, a debate starts between Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the angels regarding the rationality or the objective of such creation. We leave that issue aside for the time being. But what is quite clear is that this individual that was called Adam, that becomes the beginning of a new life on earth, is a mixture of what? Ruh sometimes, and body, spirit and body, jism and ruh, or clay and spirit, mixture of two different things. And Islam has made it clear in the verses repeatedly that no proposition will succeed in trying to guide humanity unless it's ready to address both components of this existence. If you pay attention to the physical part, you fall behind with the spirit. If you pay too much attention to the spiritual dimension, you leave at the expense of the physical one. A balance program for the well-being of a human being must address these two components together. Create a balanced society that not only the physical one is left out, or what is to do with this materialistic lifestyle is left out, the spiritual one is addressed as well. So both of them have to be addressed. And the concept of rejection of rahbaniyya in Islam, or monasticism as it exists in Christian form, is because of this, where fundamentally monastic life is withdrawal from the society, and considering your salvation as a unique individualistic, while Islam says your salvation should be in the midst of society. You can't escape your responsibility towards your other fellow members. So Islam does not accept or does not believe rejects, refuses to accept that there can be a proposition that comes to develop humanity or to guide humanity outside the framework that Islam prescribes, because it's the only program that Islam prescribes, or the only program that the Islamic program is the one that reaches the balance. There is a verse in the Holy Quran that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, we have created humanity and we understand how he or she or it functions. It's the balance between the two side and dimension which is quite critical. وَنَعْلَمُ مَا تُوَسْوِسُ بِهِ. We know exactly how this human being, this creature functions. So if we start by asking the Quran, what are the attributes, the traits of what we call preferred or society, we come up, or desired community, we come up with a number of statements. But broadly speaking, Islam sees, first of all, a clear understanding of what an insan or human beings as an individual is, what role it has in the community. That's number one. And then, in the light of this worldview, lays down a number of conditions. After the understanding is insan, the first condition for a desired community is to be centered on faith and iman, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala plays a major role, the center and the focus of the community. Ala bidhikrillah tatma'innul qulub. What brings stability to the life of human being is where the life is centered, based. Humans become God-centric, rather than the conversation we had before, where we become materialistic-centric, or annasu abidud dunya that Imam Hussein talks about. First is iman. And it's not just a verbal utterance that we believe. Tawheed and its various facets really have to penetrate in every aspect of human life, where our politics becomes the politics of Tawheed, our economics becomes the economics of Tawheed, our social structure reflects the concept of Tawheed, our personal life reflects that iman and belief that we have. Our relation and family life is centered on the revelation and the guidance, the divine guidance. Such a society, that's the first condition. Without such a condition, you are not going to have the desired community. By the way, those of you who are familiar with the Western narratives, there, at least during the past 10 or 20 years, a number of people have been writing, particularly taking few examples from Martin Luther King, but recently the concept of the beloved community, which contrasts the beloved community, where we call it the desired community or ummah, with the other options and alternatives that are available. So number one is iman. You can't have a desired community without Allah being part of it. Number two, justice, adala. The society has to be centered on an expansive justice, not just one, say, economic justice or social justice or material justice. No, on an expansive justice that covers everything. Because when we refer to the Holy Quran, we don't see any qualification of the concept of justice when Quran talks about it. لِيَقُومَ النَّاسُ بِالْقِسْطِ. Establishment of justice is absolute and paramount, and literally has to deal with every aspect of our life. The way I deal or we deal with our partners, is it just or unjust? The way we deal with our colleagues, is it just or unjust? The way we deal with our, say, education, is it just or unjust? The way we deal with our parents, just, unjust. Children, etc., etc., etc. Expansive justice that balances the society out. There is a hadith in Nahj al-Balagha. Amir al-Mu'mineen sallallahu alayhi was asked, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, al-adlu afdal am al-jud? Very delicate question. Which one is better, justice or generosity? Imam responds, al-adl. Why? لأن العدل يضع الأمور بمواضعها. Stabilizes the community. Generosity is an exception. Adl and justice in this expansive form balances the society. And that's exactly the desired community, is a balanced community. There are no extremes. And I was trying to explain this a few nights ago, graphically, why there is a need for a new revelation to come in, for the new guidance, because the society is not balanced economically, socially, politically, personally, and so on and so forth. And ultimate goal is to create this balance. خَيْرُ أُمَّةٍ أُخْرِجَتْ لِلنَّاسِ is the most balanced society on earth. Justice has to be part. Third component, unity and interconnectedness. There are a number of ahadith that creates this dynamic relationship between individuals. من أصبح ولم يهتم بأمور المسلمين فليس بمسلم. Anyone who isolates himself from the rest of the community and cares less about what happens to the rest of the community, one has to question the true Islam of these individuals. You cannot claim yourself to be part of the ummah while people cut their hands out of poverty, the children's hand, and send them out during Hajj to beg, to survive, and then you have this lavish food while everybody else is starving. That's exactly what Amir al-Mu'mineen criticized his own representative in Basra for filling up his stomach. And you see the rationale. كلكم راع وكلكم مسؤول عن رعيته. If you have care, and last night I said, when you look at the conditions for the leadership within the context of the speeches that Imam gives, two paramount prerequisites. Number one, that the life of the leader becomes the embodiment of the spirit of Islam and the book. This is why we have a hadith, مثل أمتي كمثل سفينة نوح. They become, because they embody the religion, they embody the spirit of Islam, they deserve to be the role model. To the point where Amir al-Mu'mineen sallallahu alayhi, I mentioned this a few nights ago, in the Battle of Siffin, when the Qur'ans were put on spears as a trick to create discontent within the camp of Amir al-Mu'mineen, he was telling these followers that these are nothing more than pieces of paper. I am the living Quran. So that was number one. Number two is the pain for the community. You can't be a qualified leader if you really are careless about the rest of the community. And there are a number of verses in the Holy Quran that talks to the Holy Prophet. Allah says, we understand how painful it is because you care for the rest of the community. So this unity has to come in, but based on the common denominator, which is the shared values in our life. وَاعْتَصِمُوا بحبل الله جميعا ولا تفرقوا. This part of that desired ummah, there should be a unity. There can never happen a desired ummah where every part, كُلٌّ يَجُرُّ النَّارِ إِلَى قُرْصِهِ, every part of the human structure or every part of the communal structure is pulling towards its own benefit at the expense of somebody else. And then what we call security and stability in society. فَلْيَعْبُدُوا رَبَّ هَذَا الْبَيْتِ الَّذِي أَطْعَمَهُم مِّن جُوعٍ وَآمَنَهُم مِّنْ خَوْفٍ. As long as fear exists, economic imbalance, proper and equitable social distribution doesn't exist in the society, because society is not going to be the desired one. If we have 1% or 0.1% of the community owning 99% of the wealth, and the rest have to struggle to make ends meet, even sometimes don't make it, this is not the desired community. This is the corrupt community that we try to avoid. So these are what the overall objective of a desired community. How do we establish such a community? What is the strategy? We went to the Holy Quran, we went to the Hadith, clearly defined the framework for a desired community. How do we start creating such a thing? We see again a wealth of ahadith and literature specifically about this issue. Number one, education. An ignorant society is not going to be, as long as ignorance exists, we are not going to have a desired community. This is why when you go to books on hadith, Wasa'il al-Shi'a and few others, hadith after hadith about the importance of education. طلب العلم, the famous couple of hadith, طلب العلم فريضة على كل مسلم ومسلمة. It's an obligation. اطلب العلم ولو بالصين. It's a metaphor. No matter what is the distance, go after it. Because ilm and knowledge in the hand of a believer will be beneficial more to human community than in the hand of those who do not believe. And we can see it here. Number one is the education. But the education has to be as part of a strategy such that fortifies and strengthens that basic condition of Iman. Education that teaches you that you are the unique individual, you are the center of the earth, nothing is around you. Secular mindset and individualistic in life is not going to support the basic foundation that we need for the stability of the community, which we said it has to be Tawheed and Iman in itself. So the education must be fortifying the cornerstones of the desired community, which is Iman and faith. And knowledge is the only way that we can bring communities together. Number two, and this is the critical issue. I mean, there are a number of verses in the Holy Quran that talks about هو الذي بعث في الأميين رسولا منهم يتلو عليهم آياته ويزكيهم ويعلمهم الكتاب والحكمة. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is reminding the community, the Muslim community. Remember that Allah is the one who sent the messenger, but with a clear framework. And education was part of it. Not only to purify them, not only to remind them of Allah's signs in the creation, but وَيُعَلِّمُهُمُ الْكِتَابَ وَالْحِكْمَةِ. Books, education, wisdom has to be taught. There is no faith on earth that the first moment of revelation starts with Iqra بِاسْمِ رَبِّكَ الَّذِي خَلَقَ. Human character distinguishes itself from the rest of the creation with two unique characteristics: thinking and expressive writing. And both of them are being mentioned in verses in the Holy Quran. If they remove a human tongue, unable to express himself or herself, or remove the brain, the life becomes similar to the other creatures. What gives us, what makes us, as they say, the creme de la creme of the the divine creation, is the intellect and the power of expression. Both of them are needed for education. This is why last night I said we have a unique opportunity in such gatherings. Over-reliance on emotional issue at the expense of what the educational part is really doing injustice to the whole story of Karbala, because Imam constantly talks about educating, calls individuals in, reminding them of the book, reminding them of ahadith, etc., etc. Then one of the fundamental issues that probably I will use this tomorrow is the concept of what we call family in Islam. From an Islamic point of view, social structure, the desired community, is made up of family members, not individuals, family units that come together to construct this broad reality that we call the community or the society. And in family units, if we look the wealth of ahadith that exist, yes, it talks about the intimate need of human nature. Yes, it talks about procreation and bringing children, etc., etc. But the most emphasis is the first step, because Islam considers the family to be the miniature scale of the greater entity called the community. If the family is not balanced, the community is not balanced. If the family is individualistic, the community is individualistic. If the family does not believe or react, or there is no balance in it, the community. About 8 or 9 years ago, there was a conference in Washington, I believe, regarding the crisis that American families are dealing and struggling with when it comes to bringing up children. And one of the speakers came up with this notion that the fundamental problem is the absence of what we call a stable relationship between husband and wife, or fathers and mothers. Single father or single mother creates an environment in which stability is absent. And hence we have the children pay the price and the crisis that we have to deal with. This itself, from an Islamic point of view, is extremely critical. Islam says you have a shared responsibility to somebody else. If the parents they don't teach their children that there is a shared responsibility, what do you expect? If the time is not properly addressed and divided between work outside, what we call the work outside, and the quality time inside for the children, do you expect your children to come out as Salman Farsi or Abu Dhar or somebody else? This story, I have mentioned it a few times. Many years ago, Sayyid Jawad Shahristani, which, alaykum assalam wa rahmatullah, is the son-in-law of Ayatollah Sistani, asked me to go to Canada as a representative for a couple of years. While in Canada, I went to Ottawa and to an Iraqi community, alaykum assalam wa rahmatullah. One night in the presentation, this father came to me and he said, Imam, Maulana, I have a problem. What is it? He said, with my son. Okay, what's the crisis? He said, I used to think that my son was religious, very conscientious, paid attention to his responsibilities, to prayer and everything else. Until this morning. I said, what happened? He said, well, I used to wake him up, and he would get up, offer his prayer, and go to sleep. This morning, in the middle of the adhan, suddenly silent. Just silent. So I went and I inquired to find out that this boy is asleep. What he had done was recorded the adhan, iqama, and salat all on a tape. Alaykum as-salam wa rahmatullah. So as soon as dad called him, play button, and he went to sleep. What father used to hear was the recording. Unfortunately for the boy, this time the battery was weak. In the middle, alaykum as-salam wa rahmatullah. In the middle of the adhan, suddenly the whole tape recorder stops functioning. And the father finds out. See how crafty kids can become. They circumvent everything. And I asked one question. I said, how much time do you spend, or how many hours in a day or in a week with your children? He said, Maulana, I'm a taxi driver. I go out at 6 o'clock in the morning when they are asleep, and I come back at 11 o'clock at night when they are asleep. I really don't see them that often. Only during Sunday, when I come in, they are going out. Hi, Dad, alaykum as-salam. And that's it. What do you expect? This is not called a balanced life, a family life. There is a hadith that says divide your 24 hours into 3 8-hours. One for your sleep, one for your work, one for your family, to pay attention to your wife and children. So family, stability within the family. How do we deal with children, and how do we bring up their children in the light of the education that I just talked about is critical. Because ultimately, if you look at the graph, alaykum as-salam wa rahmatullah, the relationship between the factors that ultimately come to dictate and build the character of the child, family is the first model before even school comes into it, or the social life and the community comes into it. This is why we have a number of ahadith that not only generally as a rule prohibits tuhma, ghiba, backbiting, lies, and so on. It specifically talks to the parents that try to be extremely careful, because now you have in the brain of a child a recorded machine that sees the dichotomy and the contrast between what you say and what you do, and ultimately feeds into his character. Then comes the Amr bil Ma'ruf and Nahy anil Munkar. A desired community, every member must feel obligated to challenge the corruption within the society. Corruption within the society has to be eliminated. And there is a verse in the Holy Quran that says, those who love to spread mischief, وَالَّذِينَ يُحِبُّونَ أَن تَشِيعَ الْفَاحِشَةَ, mischief in the community, and create, alaykum as-salam, and create tension and strife, the curse of Allah will be on them. Because when you try to backbite, you try to lie, you try to cheat, and so on, the balance, the respect, the trust that must exist within the society is destroyed. So you have to fight everything which is evil within the society. You can't say, well, it's not my responsibility. No, we are all responsible. And this is why in the slogan, Imam Hussein sallallahu alayhi, as he goes around constantly, أريد أن أمر بالمعروف وأنهى عن المنكر. I want to do my duty. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has obligated people, when they see injustice and corruption, to stand up and challenge it. And I am the one even more worthy to do this because of my position. This is an obligation for everyone. You can't have a balanced society if you allow the corruption to fester within the community and creates disharmony and strife within community members. Unfortunately, it has become a classic example of our community. We don't have anything else to do. We start backbiting, tuhma, ghiba, and so on. والمؤمنون والمؤمنات بعضهم أولياء بعض. The believers, male or female, one is the supporter of the other. يأمرون بالمعروف وينهون عن المنكر ويقيمون الصلاة ويؤتون الزكاة ويطيعون الله ورسوله أولئك سيرحمهم الله. Look at these conditions. Belief is the foundation of everything. But you have to practice. Your social responsibility towards other members of the community is paramount. Before even talking about salat, zakat, and everything else, يَأْمُرُونَ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ وَيَنْهَوْنَ عَنِ الْمُنكَرِ. You can't turn your face away and say, I see no evil, when evil is infesting the community. يَأْمُرُونَ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ وَيَنْهَوْنَ عَنِ الْمُنكَرِ. All these conditions must be satisfied. Then the blessing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to come. Then the mercy of Allah is going to come. إِنَّ الَّذِينَ قَالُوا رَبُّنَا اللَّهُ ثُمَّ اسْتَقَامُوا. If you want mercy of Allah to come down on your community and your community to be blessed, faith has to be the foundation of your life. But then istiqamah means perseverance. Perseverance in front of what? The challenges, the jihad, the difficulties in life that you as an individual, all of us as individuals, are responsible for them. One of them is to challenge what we call the corruption within the society. It might be one individual, before you know it, it spreads around like a cancer cell. And finally is the leadership, which is so critical. If we were to borrow a phrase from, say, management, we have Islam, consider Islam to be your blueprint. Or call it the organizational model. Islam gives you something that if you were to follow this blueprint, your society will be fixed. But any organizational model requires a management team that would implement it in your society. مثل أهل بيتي كمثل سفينة نوح علي مع الحق والحق مع علي إني تارك فيكم الثقلين كتاب الله وعترتي أو سنتي, and so on. These are all indications of the critical role that the leadership should play in achieving the balance and the desired community. Without the right leadership, without a leadership that understands the pain of the community and equipped to deal with it, desired community is not going to come. Inshallah, tomorrow night I'm going to take the issue of family and expand it and see if we were to present this concept to Quran, what kind of family? If family is supposed to be the building block of our society, what kind of family we should have? What is the desired family? And how should we navigate our relationship within such a unique entity? But as always, I have left the last 10 minutes for question and answer. I would like to remind the sisters, please, in the back, that during the English lecture, particularly those sisters that do not want to listen to English lectures, if they could refrain from conversation, allowing the sisters that have come here primarily for English lecture to a few 45 minutes of their time, and then after that they have the rest of the time for themselves, They can discuss all kinds of stories and other issues that they want to discuss up to as far as the time allows them. But the English, those who have come primarily for the English lecture, they only have 45 minutes. And it's not fair that we disrupt them because we don't understand them, or we don't understand the lecture, or we don't want to listen to the lecture. I hope, inshallah, the sisters would pay attention to this point. Any questions? رجاء من الأخوات، اليوم أحد الأخوة جاء وقال بأنه الأخوات الأمريكيات اللي يجون بالمركز جايين 45 دقيقة للمحاضرة باللغة الإنجليزية فقط، وهذه مو مع يعني بعض عليكم السلام ورحمة الله، بعض الأخوات يشتركون برا ولكن ما يردون يسمعون المحاضرة الإنجليزية. رجاء نترجاكم 45 دقيقة أعطوا مجال ذول اللي جايين على فقط اللغة الإنجليزية. أنتم عندكم مجال ورا المحاضرة باللغة الإنجليزية، عندكم ساعتين 3 اللي ممكن تستمعون بالمحاضرة أو أي برنامج أخرى. أحسن. Any questions? Go ahead.
Shaikh, you mentioned that human is made of two things, one we call body and the other one being the soul. And you also mentioned a particular thesis that we can't let either one fall behind. In this society that we live in, Western society specifically, where we are so busy in our job, work, education, etc., it becomes really hard to focus or not let your spirituality or the root part fall behind. What are some of the ways, living in this society particularly, that we can do in order to make sure that we keep both things?
Well, brother, I refuse to accept that there is any society or there is such a society that would paralyze us from organizing ourselves if we plan in advance. Sometimes we leave it until it becomes paralyzing and critical, then we say there is nothing else we can do about it. There are people living in the same society that you are discussing, and they have succeeded in having generation after generation, not only saved themselves, generation after generation of family members that have become exemplary, both boys and girls. The absence of planning is the critical issue. You can't, Allah fi nadhma amrikum. This is Amir al-Mu'mineen sallallahu alaihi wasallam in his will to Imam Hassan starts, before he even talks about salat and so on. Structuring and organizing your life is the foundation. Chaotic lifestyle is not going to achieve anything. So once we accept and understand that we are living in a society that has unique characteristics, it has certain advantages as well, but has unique characteristics. How do we circumvent these negative aspects of it and benefit or use the positive aspect towards the goal? Unfortunately, in most cases, we don't have goals, either short, medium, or long term. Let me challenge you. Go to all the Islamic centers that you are familiar with, and go to the board of directors. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi. And go to the board of directors and ask this simple question: where do you want to be 5 years from now or 10 years from now? What is the plan? The answer is we don't know. This we don't know, on the one hand, indicates that there is no plan. Other centers, other faith, they plan. They want to be this and there in this such a time. There was a clear. Programs are written a year before. We leave it till 11 hours before we start thinking about the program. So organization is the fundamental issue. Understanding your community is the second one. Okay, how do I organize with this unique characteristics? And then it's a commitment that you have to make. Understand your own responsibility. We go back to the debate about possession and ownership. Even if you become Rockefeller in life, if all the money that you collect, all the time that you spend is going to go to the bank, and you only use part of it, very small amount of it for the family, you have wasted your time at the expense of the community, at the expense of your family. Planning is the key issue here. Understanding what are our challenges, our right and our responsibilities, and how do we deal with them. If we do it, I think we will be successful. Samaat Shaikh is here, so I have to pack because to allow him to start sharp at 9:30, inshallah. Thank you very much. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.